put your right hand on the wheel. Drive all night to find an Asheville man who's there to call your own. Throw his mind, then add him to the list of things you leave behind. You'll have one more singing sweet Caroline. Won't you confuse me like you're supposed to? I'm not certain what to do about you. Sweet, leave me be. Don't make me sad I ever met you, Caroline. I'll sing this song till I forget you, Caroline. There'll be one more singing sweet Caroline. Won't you confuse me like you're supposed to? Not certain what to do about you. Sweet, leave me be. Don't make me sad I ever met you. Never met you, Caroline. Ha! Sweet Caroline. Won't you confuse me like you're supposed to? Not certain what to do about you. Sweet, leave me be. Don't make me sad I ever met you, Caroline. One more time, sweet Caroline. Oh no, baby, won't you confuse me like you're supposed to? Not certain what to do about you. Come on, sweet baby, leave me be. Don't make me sad I ever met you, Caroline. And I'll sing this song till I forget you, Caroline. You come out Friday late to hang out Riverside. You bring a couple of friends, I bring the good wine, and there I'm stumping over my tongue. I know this isn't a game. You're like a holy book written in foreign tongue. I try to understand.
Gentlemen, we'll start. Hello. We'll start getting seated if you could, please. We're going to begin momentarily.
If you wanna talk about it, Saturday night. This small town's on the east side, right till sunrise. There ain't no mystery to the way that we could get down. I feel a little lighter than before. I feel a little lighter.
I guess we are getting pretty close. So, how are you?
I'm good. Congratulations. I'm sorry I'm running a little bit late.
No, we're just right on time. All right, the front row seats. Good. Excellent. All right, good evening, everybody. It looks like everybody's ready to go. So thank all of you very much for coming, especially on a Saturday after a really nice ski day and a beautiful day out in the valley. We really do appreciate it. It's an important topic. As I begin, I want to thank you, of course. I want to thank a few other people who really helped put this together. Susan Hemmeter, who is my executive assistant here at Sugarbush, really did a lot of work pulling a lot of parts together. So Susan, thank you very much back there. Give Susan a hand. And I want to pay also a very special thanks to our partners this evening. Protect Our Winters, we'll be talking a lot more about them. So they really were the catalyst for pulling this together. We have become a top-line sponsor of Protect Our Winters, POW. And when we talked to them about things we could do to make a difference, one of them was really education, conversation about the climate crisis. We're not going to talk about climate change anymore. We're going to talk about the climate crisis. The Nature Conservancy of Vermont, of which I'm on the board right now and will become the chair this spring, has also partnered this evening with us. And right here in the valley, the Friends of the Mad River. They're celebrating their 30th year, so congratulate them on the wonderful work they've done. And I also want to mention in the back of the room that they have started a new initiative called the Community Climate Conversation. And so I'd encourage everybody, if you haven't stopped by that table, go over there, sign up for it, because it's a really interesting initiative begun by somebody right here in the valley. So I'm going to kick it off very quickly, and the point of this evening and the objective this evening is to do a few things. One is to just educate all of us even more about what's going on, to talk about the science, but then very importantly, talk about what we can do individually. You know, sometimes this is overwhelming. You know, we look at and we hear, well, it doesn't make a difference unless China gets rid of coal, unless India gets rid of coal, unless they do this, what's going to make a difference? Well, I think if we all individually do something, all revolutions have started with individuals. All revolutions have started with tiny actions that built collectively, that created a change. So what we want to do is talk tonight about what can we individually do, whether it's advocation, planting a tree, et cetera, that really can make a difference over the community as well. And we certainly want to open it up. This is a conversation. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear your opinions. So it is meant to be a really interactive session. So I'm really blessed to have four wonderful people on the panel. Aaron Rice, who grew up in Massachusetts. He moved west for a long period of time. He was one of the first recipients of the Flying Ryan Scholarship, which he used to pursue his passion. And if you read the press release, you'll know that this guy, unaided by any lift, did 2.5 million of vertical, set an all-time record for vertical. And the prior record, by the way, was 2 million miles. He did 2.5 million miles. Yeah. And what's even better is he's moved back to Vermont, lives in Stowe, and now works for an environmental consulting company in Montpelier, right? So Aaron. We're really fortunate to have really one of the most knowledgeable climatologists, Professor Cameron Wake from the University of New Hampshire. He's done a lot of studies. He's done some terrific research. He really knows what he's talking about, and I think we're all going to learn a lot from him. Heather Furman, who is the state director of the Nature Conservancy of Vermont and is also dynamic, and is going to be talking about what the Nature Conservancy's role is in the climate crisis. I think most of you know the Nature Conservancy has done wonderful things over the years in terms of conserving land, wetlands, water, but now at the national level and the Vermont level has really focused itself on what can it do for climate change, and we'll be talking about some of the nature-based solutions to the climate crisis as well. And then finally, David Perry. David Perry is Director of Sustainability at Altera. As you know, Altera is the new owner of Sugarbush. David spent many years before Altera was formed 2 years ago at Aspen Company. Aspen has been the leader in the ski industry of really focusing on environment, on the climate crisis, on sustainability. So he brings that knowledge to Altera, and he'll be talking about what Altera is doing, what it can do, and how it's going to support this initiative as well. So we're going to start off with just a quick video about POW, and then I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Rice. Tony.
The outdoor community knows the power of margins.
Oh, she almost just got swept.
The seemingly small efforts made at just the right moments carry enough weight to tip the scale from failure to success.
Going for her first win of the season, and it's Jessie Diggins of the United States.
These are the margins that define our community.
More than 15,000 scientists are sounding an alarm about climate change.
Environmental and political history are also made at the margins. 77,000 votes in key districts swung the 2016 presidential election. 3 Senate votes opened the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to drilling. To solve the climate crisis, the world needs our community. It's the sum of our small efforts where we turn our passion into purpose and deliver climate victories where they're needed most.
Remember that act now? You'll see that again at the end, but this is a call to action on the part to protect our winners. So Aaron, let me start with you. You're a millennial, you're a skier, you set the all-time record for vertical, so why did you get involved with POW? And what's POW all about?
Yeah, so first it is feet. I'm not quite good enough to do that many miles, but yeah, I got involved with POW because skiing is obviously what I love to do. I did it every day for a year and traveled the world doing it and talked to lots of people and read lots from scientists that know much more than I do that are saying this is happening and it's happening now. And then I made this decision to move to a relatively warm climate at low elevations in Vermont, where we're especially susceptible to climate change. So in order to keep doing what I want to do, becoming a member of POW and being on the Athlete Alliance, being able to get people together, whether that's athletes or industry people, and going and talking to legislators and getting them to pass resolutions that support green energy bills or whatever it is, climate change forward or carbon cap and trade or whatever, supporting that and being able to get everybody together to do that was really why I wanted to join POW and work towards that.
Thanks, Aaron. We'll hear a lot more, as we go on through the evening, but let's talk to the professor. So now it's time to do a little homework, take a look at the facts and the science, and Cameron, thank you again for being here.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I do want to start with a slide that shows you the lifelong love affair that I've had with snow and ice. I was one of that early cadre. You'll see there my old Karoo skis, double camber, skiing in the backcountry in the Canadian Rockies with like the best pair of double Merrell boots that were ever made that changed the sport. But some other, most recently, some pictures from Denali where went skiing and drilled some ice core. But I really want to talk to you about the science of climate change, and I want to start with 3 things, just quickly. The first is that climate changes. It always has and always will. We're in a climate crisis now. But there is an extensive and ever-growing body of scientific evidence that shows that humans are the main driver of that change. And once you acknowledge that, you realize the following is true. The future climate is literally in our hands. The climate that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren inherit depend upon the actions we take today. The second point is that we really have to move from the tyranny of or to the opportunity of and. We have to stop having this conversation about the economy versus the environment. I think we've transitioned from that a long time ago across much of New England, but we really have to take that across the entire country. And it's the economy and the environment, and I think that being here at Sugarbush is a fantastic example of that. And then third, I just want to share that I've been working on this topic for 30 years, and that it is a profoundly moral issue for me now, because it's those who are most vulnerable who are going to suffer the most. So it's really important for all of us to act, not only for the sports and the lifestyle that we love, but really for all of those vulnerable people. All right, so now I'm going to talk about science. Boiled down 30 years of climate science research, boiled down into 12 words, right? It's real, it's us, scientists agree, it's bad, we can fix it. If you leave with nothing else from tonight, leave with that, tell your friends. Yeah, sorry, I gotta go now. I did want to share a little bit of data with you. So what's really shocking, when we started looking into the meteorological records, we found that it's really our winters that are warming the most fastest, so the most rapidly, excuse me. So here's a plot of winter warming. You can see the mid-latitudes, those lots of dark reds. That's 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit per decade for the last 5 decades. You do your math, that's 8 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So we've been warming 7 to 8 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit the last 50 years in our winters. It's 2 to 3 times the rate of global warming, and it's really impacted the sport that we love. Another way to show the same data, this is a plot specifically for Burlington, New Hampshire, very place specific, right? Same time period, we've seen an increase in 7 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a significant change in temperature that we've already experienced. Next couple slides didn't work out too well, so just skip to this one. I have a colleague at the University of New Hampshire, Professor Alex Contasta and Liz Burakowski, who've been working on a whole range of different indicators. And this is one in particular that I thought might be of interest to you. So they looked at the number of snowmaking days, and they took a very conservative approach to this and said, you're making more snow when it's colder, so they've used the -5 degrees Celsius, which in the scientific literature is a common threshold. You snowmakers in the audience, you can tell me if that's correct or not, but we're using number of nights when it's below 5 degrees centigrade. And then what the red dots show you, the red dots and the blue dots, are the rate of change per decade in number of days. So if you look at the entire Northeast, right, we've seen a decrease of 2 days per decade in the number of days that we can make snow. So this is over 100 years. So, right? We've seen per decade, so it's 10 decades. So 10 times 2, we've seen 20 to 25 day decrease in the number of snowmaking days. That's true for snow on ground days. That's true for frost days. That's true for really cold days. Any winter indicator that you look at, you see a significant change, and the rate of that change has increased since 1970. Another piece of work that Alex and her colleagues are doing are this notion called winter weather whiplash. I'm providing you with that definition up there, but you all know what it is. These really rapid, unexpected changes in winter when we pass through the 32 degree Fahrenheit or 0 Celsius isotherm, something happens. We get a big rainstorm, or we get a huge winter thaw and winter warming. The one that I remember the most is sort of Snowtober, which happened in October in 2011. All of you in the younger generation here are going to know that because that's when Halloween got canceled. And what we're seeing is we're beginning to define these because these winter weather whiplash events have really important impacts, not only on the snow sports industry, but on our economy writ large. And they have really big impacts on our ecosystems that perhaps I will hear a little bit more about. But this is one of the unexpected impacts, is we're not just seeing a general warming, we're seeing an increase in these number of really extreme events that really affect us in a significant way. I also wanted to bring up my colleague, Liz Burakowski, who's really taken this on and has become a scientist working very closely with POW, and over the course of the past decade has published what I would argue are 2 very influential reports that look at the impact of climate change on winter recreation with a specific focus on the sports industry, the skiing industry. And these are easy to find online. You can find them on the POW website. But I want to share one result from this report. When you look over the last 20 years and you look at the 5 best years in each individual state in terms of sort of amount of snowfall and cold temperatures, you'll see that in those top 5 years, revenues are above average by almost $700 million, and there's an increase in almost 12,000 jobs across the country. When you look at the 5 bottom years, we see a decrease in $1 billion of revenue and a decrease in 17,000 jobs. This is not just something that presents some hardships and I can't get as many skier days as I'd like to get. There's some real impacts on these economies. And one of the really important points the reports make is that these are economies that tend to be in rural areas and so really depend upon these jobs and these incomes. So there's some significant impact not only for the sport but for the communities that they live in. All right, everybody take a deep breath. You're all going to understand this diagram in a minute or two. So one of the things that we love to do as scientists is try to answer this question: what is our climate going to be like in the future? And remember, I started by saying the future climate is literally in our hands. So in order to project future climate, we have to know what human beings are going to do and what our economy is going to do, which is essentially impossible. So what scientists do is actually we frame this by using different scenarios. In this case, we use emission scenarios. So that's a fancy word. Just think about them as plausible storylines. These are not things that will happen. These are things that could happen. So up here, you've got the RCP 4.5. That's a lower global emissions scenario. If I had more time, I'd walk you through it all, but I don't. And then the RCP 8.5 is the higher emissions scenario. Think of one higher emission scenario, business as usual. We keep relying upon fossil fuels. Lower emission scenarios, we transition pretty rapidly to renewable energies, energy efficiency, and battery storage. So you'll see all the thin lines in the back as we downscaled lots of global climate models. We use those emissions as input to global climate models, and we downscale that to the Northeast. All those skinny lines are all the different models. The thick lines are the ones you should focus on, and they represent the ensemble mean, which is how scientists think about this. Run lots of models, take the mean, and sees what it tells us. So a couple really important things. You see the black line is actual, and the gray line in back here is what the models come out with. We're doing a really good job modeling, in this case, average wintertime minimum temperatures, right? Agree? We're not getting the variability because we're taking an ensemble mean. Out here, by 2050, 2055, there's no difference in temperature between the high emissions and the low emissions scenario. What does that tell you? That's an amount of warming that we are committed to. We cannot get away from that amount of warming, so we better start learning how to adapt to a different climate. But the difference out at 2100 between the two emission scenarios is stark. And the difference in terms of wintertime sports is that the higher emission scenario, we probably don't have much in the way of wintertime recreation outside with snow and ice. On the lower emission scenario, we can probably preserve it, especially in northern New England. So I don't want to be dramatic, but that's what is at stake. And we have to turn this around in terms of reducing global emissions in order to keep the industry that we love. This is another really data-rich last couple of slides here, but we've also taken those same models and we looked at how early is the snow going to disappear across the Northeast. So these colors down here represent the snow disappearance date. So this is February 1 in the really dark blues. So you don't like the dark blues. Over there in the light greens, that's May 31, you like those, right? I'm assuming you all like snow? All right. So you like the light greens. So here it is, April 12th, that's the average from 1980 to 2050. That's the average for the entire region shown here. So under that lower emissions scenario, by the end of the century, down here, right, 2070 to 2099, what we see is that the snow disappears 2 weeks earlier. That's the low emission scenario. That's the best we can hope for, right? Under the higher emission scenario, we see that snow leaving 3 weeks earlier on average, which means in a really bad year, it would be like 6 weeks or 2 months earlier. So again, I just wanted to provide you, this is the future of snow, and I'm telling you what the future of snow is, and it depends on the actions that we take here at Sugarbush, here in New England, here in the United States, and globally, that's really going to dictate what happens to our winter sports. So this is my last slide. I think we're going to get into this discussion later. But the question is, what do we do about it? Well, we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and we have to adapt, and we have to do it both at the same time. Actually am always a glass is half full or better, completely full. That climate change is the innovation opportunity for the 21st century. We just have to have the political will to get forward and move with it. And I would argue that we need actions at multiple spatial scales and multiple institutional levels. So we have to act in cities and towns, in the state, regionally, and country. We have to act as individuals, which is how WIN has set this up, but our nonprofits, our business and investment and government also need to act. We need everybody to be pulling in the same direction if we're going to sort of address the dramatic change that needs to happen.
Cameron, thank you. So you made a very good point. You know, it's either good for the economy or good for the environment, right? And that's no longer the debate. And I think more and more businesses clearly understand that. So let me just share a few things about how this is impacting Sugarbush already. So a lot of people ask me, so are you seeing a shorter season? And I'm saying, no, we had a 162-day season last year. We'll have 156 this year, only because we opened 6 days later because of Thanksgiving. So are you seeing less snow? Well, 3 years ago, we had our 5th worst snowfall. 2 years ago, we had our 2nd best by only ½ an inch. Last year, it was average. So we look at it, no, we're not really. But that's covering up the issue, because we're lucky to be further north, higher elevation. What we are seeing is what Cameron alluded to, is much greater volatility. And how's that impacting us? Well, in many ways. So this year, we've had 5 roller coaster events so far. We always have January thaws, you know that, we've been around here, but 5 by this time of year, that's unusual. We may have a 6th next week. So what does that do? It means we make snow, we lose snow, we make snow, we lose snow. That costs money. That puts stress on the environment. We have to make snow, but it's creating additional challenges to doing that. The intensity of the winds, you know, means we're going to be on wind hold more, we're going to have damage. This year we had to spend $400,000 on something that nobody here will appreciate because you can't see it. Instead of buying a new groomer for $400,000, we decided we needed to bury the power lines that went from the base area to mid-mountain to power our upper lifts and our snowmaking. Why? Because we can't risk a tree coming down in the middle of Christmas or this week and being out of business. So we buried the power lines. That's a pure reflection of the volatility we're seeing. We've had, and you've all experienced this, maybe even worse than we have, we've had 200-year floods in the last 25 years. How did it impact us? It washed out our snowmaking pond. Both times the river came, took out the uphill dam, flowed the river in, it stopped, and silt came down. We had to drain the pond, take out tons of silt at a cost of about $1 million. 2.5 groomers. Uninsured. So what are we doing? Well, we're planning on a secondary pond out of the floodplain in case that happens. What's the cost of that? I don't know, but it's millions. The increased weather and rain we're seeing is increasing the flow of the tributaries down into the Mad River. So that's undermining our current dam. 2 summers ago, we had to reinforce the foundation. Last year, we saw it actually breach under the dam. We're seeing increased ice flows. When ice flows comes at a fixed dam, you can imagine what happens. So now we're looking at a new project to replace the dam with an inflatable dam so that if we see the ice flows, it can be deflated, then reflated. That's a cool $1 million. So yeah, climate change has woken us up because if we don't do something about it, it's creating an enormous cost and risk to the business. So I think that's why, Cameron, you're seeing more businesses understand not only are we doing the right thing, but we better do it or we're not going to be a sustainable business. So let's turn to nature-based solutions. And Heather, love to hear from you.
Sure. Thank you, Win. And thank you for those powerful numbers and those powerful stories to kick us off. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Nature Conservancy and the role that we see nature playing in helping us address the climate crisis. And, you know, we all love nature. I ski, I hike, I used to do a lot of rock climbing. I used to do a lot of trail running. I like to be out there in nature. Right now, I'm turning my attention to sourcing my food locally, and I've been doing a lot of hunting and fishing. And there's something that's really wrong about being out there in November in your hunter plaid, and it's 60 degrees, and there's ticks crawling up your leg, and there's no snow to track deer. You know something is wrong then, right? So I feel really lucky that I get to wake up every morning and go to work for an organization that is doing everything that we possibly can to address climate change. So a little bit about the Nature Conservancy for those of you who are not familiar with us. We are, in fact, the largest environmental nonprofit in the world. We have a chapter in all 50 states and 79 countries around the world. We have over 4,000 employees. We work on land, water, climate issues. This year, we are celebrating here in Vermont, we're celebrating our 60th anniversary, and we have protected a little over 300,000 acres of land in some of the most iconic places that you might be familiar with. Green River Reservoir, Camel's Hump have been part of the work that we have done over the 60-year history. We're known for our land protection work. But now, with the imperative of climate change, we need to bring together science and policy and on-the-ground projects to solve these big environmental challenges. So I'm going to set a little context for you from the perspective of nature, and it's not great. It's really kind of dire, as a matter of fact. If you think you are seeing fewer birds in the sky since the 1970s, it's because you're seeing fewer birds in the sky since the 1970s. We have lost 3 billion birds since 1970. There's an abundance crisis, not just a threatened and endangered species crisis, but an abundance crisis. All of these ecosystems that you see here have lost a significant percentage on the planet, and as a result, we're losing habitat, we're losing species. Mammals have declined by 82%. Butterfly abundance is down 35% over 40 years. We're losing our insects. You've probably read about that. And of course, and our amphibians are threatened. 30% are now threatened or endangered. So there's a real crisis going on. The number that always really just sticks me is that humans and their livestock now make up 96% of the biomass on Earth. Wildlife, only 4%. That's a dramatic change in 40 years. So then you layer on climate change, right? This is my road, actually. I live in Jericho Center, Vermont, and this was not Tropical Storm Irene. This was actually a rain event that happened the spring before. And we are now seeing, on average, 2 major flood events per year in Vermont. Between 2011 and 2020, there were 17 declared natural disasters, which is 3 times the previous decade. Vermont, little Vermont, is now spending nearly $70 million a year on repairs to public infrastructure due to flooding, and that doesn't even include the private investment like Wynn spoke of with the repairs to his snowmaking pond. So we don't have that kind of money to continue to invest in public infrastructure due to these floodings. We have to take action. Another statistic, species movement. Species are moving their ranges north. This is a animation that was done by Nature Conservancy scientists to show the projected path of species movement as the climate changes. Species are moving 11 miles north and 30 feet in elevation each decade, which is 2 to 3 times faster than the normal rate of species movement. We're seeing a spike in disease, and for both human and wildlife communities, this is not good. We see Lyme disease. We haven't had ticks like we have now. The winter ticks is decimating our moose population in the Northeast Kingdom, and it can be a really sad situation. So that's the bad news. I got a little bit of good news for you. If we choose to act, nature actually does offer us solutions. We've been degrading our habitats. The slide that I showed you earlier showed habitat loss around the world. If we begin to restore, protect, and restore our forests, stop the habitat loss, nature can provide more than a third of the carbon reductions needed to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. That is incredible. By restoring our rivers, getting our development out of our floodplains, folks, this is one of the most important things. If you are passionate about climate change, I know here in the Mad River Valley, we've seen huge flooding. Our development out of the floodplains is one of the most important things we can do. It reduces human hazards, it reduces infrastructure damage, and reduce costs. And if you're a Vermonter, you probably have heard the study that was done in Middlebury a number of years ago after Tropical Storm Irene. Just upstream from Middlebury is the Otter Creek swamps, and the Nature Conservancy played a pretty significant role in conserving Otter Creek swamps. That saved that community nearly $2 million in damages because those wetlands worked like a big sponge to absorb those floodwaters. They saw much less damage than many other surrounding communities. So the other thing that we can do, if we're moving in the right direction when we think about how nature connects us, if we can support denser development and keep our forest and habitats connected, it allows for those forest economies to thrive. It allows for species movement as the climate changes, and of course, it gives us a place to play. And in order to maximize all that nature can do to store carbon, to filter our water and store floodwaters, to give us wildlife and wild places to recreate, we need to know where to prioritize our land protection. And this is some of the primary work that the Nature Conservancy is doing right now, helping to identify those places that give us a connected and resilient landscape. And if we all work together to support this, we're sharing this map with our state government partners, our conservation, our land trust partners all over the country. This resilience analysis has been done for the entire country. We can, as Cameron said, we can make a difference in turning the needle on climate change. So I personally, one of the favorite things that I like to do when I'm out in the woods, I want to see wildlife. That is really central to who I am. It defines my life. I want to see wildlife out there, and I have a responsibility to those critters. We have done this damage to the planet. We can repair the damage to the planet. Nature can be a safety net for all of us, and if nature can thrive, then people are going to thrive too.
Thank you, Heather. You know, Heather mentioned the value of healthy forests, for example. I think one of the assets we have in Vermont is we really do have some healthy forests. You know, I learned at the Nature Conservancy meeting the other day that, if I'm correct, we're sort of medium growth now because we were deforested, you know, in the early part of the century. Now we've got medium growth, which is actually, as what Jim Shallow was saying, one of the best things for carbon absorption. So right now, I think in Vermont, our forests are absorbing 40 to 50% of our carbon emissions, and that can be a lot more. But I think we have to really make sure that we're preserving those forests, we keep them healthy, and that we're also looking at opportunities to reforest. One statistic that the Nature Conservancy gave me a few weeks ago is a healthy forest, 1 acre of a healthy forest absorbs the carbon emissions of 27 cars driven in an entire year. So just take that factoid. Gives you an idea of what that really does do. So David, let's turn to you, last but not least. You've got this exalted title of Director of Sustainability at Alterra. So what does that mean, and what are you doing, and what can you be doing in the future?
Thanks, Win, and thanks to the panel. I mean, it's an honor to be here with the knowledgeable people I'm sharing the stage with, and a few people that I talked to before we started in the audience. We have a very knowledgeable audience here tonight, too, and I'm looking forward to your questions and comments, too, as well. So, you know, for me, we started this new company called Alterra. We're 2.5 years old, and I was the founding chief operating officer, president of that company. And I deliberately put my hand up to change my job last August as we were growing. we split my job into three, my former job into three parts, and I said, I don't want to do the day-to-day operations anymore. I want to follow my passion. And I've been a passionate skier my whole life and been fortunate enough to work in the mountain resort business my whole life. But my real passion now, of course, is really tackling the climate crisis that we're in now and trying to do what I can in my position in business to move the needle in any way possible. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I'm Executive Vice President of Sustainability and Special Projects at Alterra. And of course, Sugarbush is the newest member of the Alterra family. You know, we now own and operate 15 ski resorts, plus Canadian Mountain Holidays, the largest heli ski operator in the world. And so, you know, my path has been a little bit different, but not dissimilar from many of you maybe in this valley. I live out west, so I have a western point of view, although I was born in a small gold mining town in northern Ontario, Canada. And moved around a lot as a kid. But you know, when I listen to Cameron talk and see the science on this board and to listen to the panel put the facts and figures forward, it's like a gut punch for me. Is it like that for you? Like it just brings it vividly to life once again, and you know, it just reinforces the urgency of now that what we have to do. And so the other reason I'm doing this, the reason it's my passion, I think I share that with a lot of people in this room, is I'm doing this for my kids. You know, I've got two daughters in their early 20s, and you know, when I worked as a senior executive at Ski Areas in Aspen for 16 years and Whistler Blackcomb for 18 years, and as my kids are growing up, they'd ask me, Dad, what do you do when you go to work? And I'd tell them, and they would tell their friends. I finally overheard them say to their friends what their dad does for work. And they said, what does your dad do? And they said, he goes to meetings. Because I'm always in a meeting. And so now my girls are actually more proud of the work that I'm tackling now on sustainability and trying to tackle this climate crisis of all the jobs I've had in my life. So that makes me proud as a father, but also is an illustration of the responsibility that I feel, and I think all of you in this room feel, to do something now. You know, we that love to ski and ride and live in the outdoors, like all of us, I think, in this room, we truly are the canaries in the coal mine for climate change. And I thought about that analogy. It's an unfortunate but apropos analogy, right? Canaries, cute little yellow birds that miners used to put in coal mines that died when they breathed in methane, a greenhouse gas. And now here we are in these beautiful outdoor mountain environments, and we know exactly what's going on. We are the canaries not in coal mines, but in the mountains and in the outdoors. We're seeing it and we feel it. When we see the stats on the screen, we know they're true because we've witnessed the change and we feel the change. I certainly have in the places I've lived. You know, in the mountains of Aspen, you know, I lived at 8,000 feet and the mountains go up from there. And stats on the shortening of winter and the rising temperatures are very obvious. In Aspen, just to illustrate the point, you talked about loss of snowmaking days. We used to track it, and we still track it, as how many days the temperature drops below freezing in a 24-hour cycle. So it's similar measurement. And that number of days has reduced by 1 day per year for the last 20 to 25 years, since we've been closely tracking it. So basically winter in the Aspen area is shortening by 1 day per year. And that's fast. That's really fast. Now, does it mean that skiing in winter is going away? No, it doesn't. We're adapting. We're making more snow. We're getting more efficient at it. We're doing better summer grooming. So skiing is still very much alive, and I'm optimistic it will continue to be that way. But you know, what we did when I was out west at Aspen Skiing Company is we tried to figure out what we could do with our own operation to make our contribution, because otherwise we're just hypocrites. We could stand up and shout about climate change, and here we are enjoying the outdoors and skiing and using a lot of energy to run snowmaking and lifts and buildings in pristine mountain environments. So we're hypocrites, right? So what are you doing about it? We used to get asked that all the time. So we tried to put up wind turbines. They blew over because the wind was too volatile because of climate change. Literally, the test tower blew over twice. We couldn't do wind turbines at Snowmass. We put in solar systems down the valley, and yes, there's a lot of sun in Colorado. Those were helpful, but not big enough. We tried micro-hydro plants to reverse our snowmaking pipes in the spring so they could run a little, make some electricity. We tried everything. It wasn't enough, right? We weren't offsetting our use. We were still very dirty in our energy use. So we literally used the coal, the canary in the coal mine analogy, and got inventive. We figured out that there was some big, huge underground coal mines about 30 miles away from Aspen that were still in operation. Some of them were, some of them were not. And of course, they had extensive systems to vent the methane out of those mine shafts so the miners could work. And it was just being vented in the atmosphere as a really, really bad greenhouse gas. We approached the mines and said, can we take your methane and run it through generators to create electricity? And of course, the byproduct is CO2, which is much less potent than greenhouse gas. The net benefit was 3 times our carbon footprint and 100% of the electricity use of Aspen Skiing Company on an annual basis, just by tapping the methane, the waste methane in the mines 30 miles away. We did that 7 years ago. It cost us $5.6 million, and it even had a financial return. We have an 11% IRR on that little investment. So it just shows that if you put your nose to the grindstone and get innovative and think outside the box, there are solutions that even we can make as ski area operators. You know, I'm really, really proud of what Sugarbush is doing now and what the state of Vermont is doing. You're way ahead of a lot of the jurisdictions that we're doing business in right now. I'm optimistic about what's happening in Utah with Rocky Mountain Power and the state committing to, you know, greening their energy grid. Optimistic about what's happening in Colorado, where, frankly, coal-fired power state, right? Now about 76% of the power still comes from coal in Colorado. It's sad, but at least people are waking up to it and making rapid changes. So, you know, when I think about what we can do at Alterra now that, you know, Sugarbush is part of our family, is that we have a responsibility and we have a deep commitment to do everything in our power. And I have sort of 3 legs to the stool that I'm rolling out across the entire company in North America and beyond. Number 1 is, I call it green our own house, which is take care of things operationally, be efficient. You know, make sure we're doing the lighting retrofits and we're getting efficient snowmaking and being responsible stewards of our land and our forests and everything else, and being really as clean on energy as possible. Number 2 is speak with one voice, and that's why I'm so impressed by the audience here tonight. Because by speaking with one voice, it's not just the staff and the operators and the owners of the ski resort, it's the community that surrounds the ski resort and the people that come to visit us as guests. I want all of us to be speaking with one voice on the climate crisis issue, and that's why I'm impressed with the turnout here tonight. And the 3rd leg of our stool is to take what we've done, or, you know, to tackle the hypocrisy, unite around one voice, and then advocate for change. That's what we need to do, and that's what all of us need to do. And we need to ask ourselves exactly what can each of us do. I think we'll get into that more as the evening goes on. But as skiers and outdoor enthusiasts, we are uniquely qualified, actually, to speak with a credible voice. You know, and how many of you in the room have written a letter to your congressional representation taking action on climate policy in the last year or 2? That's actually pretty good. That's better than any audience I've seen. So, but it's not enough, okay? Those of you who haven't, it's so easy to do, right? There's even form letters on the Protect Our Winters website about sending it to your congressional representatives. You can sign that and you can email it in because they need to hear the voice. I've been to Washington, D.C. each of the last 2 years on a mission to talk to our lawmakers to try and advocate for action on climate policy. And we know that, you know, there's a lot of people who are receptive to that, but there's a whole bunch of people that are afraid to talk about it and afraid to take action in Congress. And you know what? They tell me, whether it's true or not, in their offices with their staff, is that they're not hearing from their constituents enough that this is an important issue. And I went, really? Oh my gosh. Okay, let's get on that, okay? Skiers and snowboarders and outdoor enthusiasts, our voice really matters. And writing letters and making phone calls to congressional leaders really matters. We can do that, and we can speak with a credible voice. I remain optimistic about the future. I really, really do, because otherwise, what do? Do you give up? Well, I'm not ready to give up. Are you ready to give up? No? Are we going to tackle this thing? I think we are, okay? And we've got leaders on the stage tonight, and we've got a lot of will. We need to translate that will into political will to make policy changes and then really take action. So I'm proud to be part of it, and here we go. The future is now.
Well said. David, thank you. That's impressive. It's actually a good segue into what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit more about what we can do. So let's start up here on the stage. You know, what can Sugarbush do? Well, I am proud that we've started to do a lot, and we can certainly do a lot more. The last number of years, we really focused on the thing that we thought had the biggest impact, and that is energy efficiency. You know, David mentioned, you know, we're a big user of energy. We're not going to go back and not use energy. We can't not make snow. But in the last several years, by the investments we've made, and thanks to Energy Efficiency Vermont, we couldn't have done it without that. You know, we did get some of, I like to say we got our money back because we paid into it, but nevertheless, it was an agency that helped us. We've been able to reduce our usage of electricity kilowatt hours by 34%. So that's significant, yeah. And it's good business because I'm paying less to Mary Powell, or was paying less to Mary Powell, paying less to the current Mary at Green Mountain Power. So it's good for the environment, it's good for business, and frankly, the quality of the snow is better too. So it's really a triple win. You know, we've tried to do little things, whether it's composting, you know, helping our guests understand how to recycle, which is complicated. You know, you figure out, is the coffee cup, you know, in the landfill, is the cup in the recyclable, is the holder, you know, it's really complicated. So this year, thanks to people like Margot's suggestion, we have people actually collecting the trays. We've added extra labor costs, but we've reduced kind of the pollution we're putting into the recycling and composting bins. We've added a lot of EV chargers around here, Lincoln Peak, Mad River, to, you know, again, encourage and motivate people to use electric vehicles getting here. You know, we've tried to encourage people to use the public transportation instead of driving a single person per car here. Little things like that. You know, we're hoping one day that those groomers that went by that operate on diesel, you know, we do use biodiesel, but hopefully we'll get an electric diesel or hybrid. And right now the technology isn't there that we're willing to make that investment, but hopefully that will be there over time. You know, we've partnered with solar developers, Green Lantern, and they've developed 5 solar fields generating about 2.5 megs of power. We've used our net metering to allow that to happen, and we're working with Mad River Solar here in the Valley to put another solar field in one of our parking lots. So a lot of cumulative things like that. That's what we've been trying to do. Now, what I'd like to do now is, you know, let's talk about individually. So what can we individually do that can make a difference and really help address this crisis? And maybe, Cameron, let me start with you, because you started to talk a little bit about that.
All right, so you can imagine I think about this a lot. And so each of you in the audience might think I'm going to say, like, buy an electric car or change a light bulb. But here's the thing that I think we do not think about enough, is I'm going to ask you to interrogate your investments. And the reason is that, and there's 2 really important reasons for that. One is, I should preface this by saying, don't ever take investment advice from a climate scientist. But ExxonMobil's losing a lot of money, and Tesla is not, right? So we need to fund the revolution. That's going to be the energy efficiency revolution, the electric car revolution, the generating wind power in the Gulf of Maine revolution, the increasing housing density and transit revolution. That's all going to take trillions of dollars. And let's not wait for our government to get on board. Let's create that investment by where we put our money. At the same time, it turns out, right, you're going to make more money if you're in green investments. I'll just share one story. So I do a lot of work at the University of New Hampshire on this. We transitioned a quarter of our endowment to ESG investments, environmental, social, and governance, positive screens. And the rate of return over the last year was 21% for those investments. It was 16% for the rest of our investment. Guess who's looking pretty smart on the investment side right now? And then one other piece I would add, that it is an individual action, but I think it's really important at an institutional level. So it's wonderful that Sugarbush has the leadership that it has to do the things it wants to do. Let's say not all of our institutions have that. So not only is it about changing your own life and reducing your emissions in your home and in your transportation, and not doing it all at once, right? You do it over time. But really, it's taking that knowledge and then taking it to your institution and getting them to change. So University of New Hampshire, we've reduced our emissions 50% over the last 20 years, while we've doubled the amount of students that we house on campus, and we are going to be net zero emissions by 2050.
That's great. Thank you. You know, Cameron is absolutely right. I spent more of my life in the investment world than in the snow world, but clearly the trend in the investment world is towards ESG investing. And if you take a look, as Cameron said, at the actual performance of those funds now, they're actually doing very well. And that's a conversation you can have if you have a 401k with your investment advisor. Clearly, the young people are on this much more than people my generation, but it is a growing trend that's going to have, I think, a big difference. Let's talk about action, because that's the other thing that, you know, David mentioned he was in Washington. You know, we've decided at Sugarbush to get more actively involved as well in advocation. And, you know, you do it a little bit with trepidation because you don't want to be political. You don't want to vote for Republicans or Democrats, you know, because our audience is composed of all types of people. But I think more and more we've realized that we do have to take a stand. And not everybody's going to like it. So I did testify in favor of the Global Warming Solutions Act that just passed the House here. And I did write an op-ed as a follow-up. So yesterday I'm sitting in my office and I got a call from somebody and I looked at it. You know, everything's identified, so you know who's calling. It was 603 New Hampshire. I figured it's a client. I picked it up. I said, "Hi, Win Smith." He said, "Hi, this is," I'll use the name John. "You're too liberal for me." I have never been called too liberal. So I'm saying, "Excuse me?" He said, "I don't like the letter you wrote." He said, "I'm never going to ski at Sugarbush again." I said, "Do you mean the letter on the environment?" "Yes, I've been plowing for 50 years. This is all bullshit. You know, I've seen this come and go." I said, "Well, excuse me, I respect your opinion, but I respectfully disagree, and I'm sorry you're not going to ski here anymore." Now, it turned out I did some research. There's no evidence he's ever skied here before. But the point is our position is probably going to irritate some of our clients, some people in our community. But I think you have to have enough courage to take that action and do what you think is right, even if it irritates some people. So now let's talk about advocacy. POW is really pushing this. So what can everybody do here, and what is POW encouraging everybody to do?
Totally. So listening to all this, I definitely start feeling overwhelmed, and I'm guessing some other people in the audience feel similarly. I have done personal changes, but it feels like my personal change might not solve the problem, and I don't have any money to change where it's invested yet. So I think about what can I do that's going to affect change in a bigger scale. And I think the biggest thing is looking towards the people with the power, and that's your elected officials. And so whether that's casting your vote when the time comes for somebody that is strong against climate change, or whether that's calling your representative and telling them to support the climate change bill that just passed. I think that's how individuals can group together and really make change, and we do live in an amazing democracy where everybody's vote counts. And so for me, that's how I see the biggest change that we can all make. And we just filled this whole room, and it really doesn't take that many people. You're looking at elections right now in battleground states where the elections are swinging by a few thousand votes. So if you can get everybody to get out, and a lot of people already feel strongly, but they're not necessarily getting out there and voting on the day. So I think that's the biggest place.
So David, we were in Washington together. So you had sort of tougher visits. You know, when we visit Peter Welch and Bernie and, you know, Pat Leahy, it's like kumbaya. You know, this is not having to convince them, right? So you have a nice, you know, meeting, but, you know, they've already been convinced. So for the Vermonters in this room, you know, where we really have people that are understanding of this, what do you think we can do in terms of advocacy?
You know, there's obviously on the political front, you know, as I mentioned before, you know, literally speaking up and writing letters, making phone calls to congressional offices. I do believe that's important. But there's a lot more that we can do, you know, and I can't tell each of you what you can do because you know your world and you know what strengths you have. I'll tell you just a quick story. It was when I was more of a marketing executive in the ski industry than an ops person, and it was about 10 years ago. And it was in Aspen Skiing Company, and people look at Aspen as a place of wealth and excess, right? Celebrities and that kind of thing. It's true. They're the wealthy celebrities are there. It's a running joke in Aspen that people fly their Gulfstream jet in with 2 people and a poodle on it, and and the carbon footprint of that poodle is really, really high. And people used to accuse us at Aspen and say, well, how could you speak about climate, because you represent the excess of the world that's causing the problem. And so we turned that around and said, well, actually, no, that makes it even more important that we speak. And so we did an entire ad campaign. We took our whole annual advertising budget and did a campaign called The Death of Snow. I know some of you might have seen it in magazines. It was a while back. And it was interesting because, it was a picture of like a piece of ice melting with kind of red background and the death of snow. And we talked about the importance of climate change and doing something about it. We were being a little bit of a shock. We were trying to send a little bit of a shock out to our industry and to skiers. Well, the biggest pushback we got from that ad campaign didn't come from our guests or our locals. It came from our own industry, like the ski business, the ski resort industry. My colleagues in the industry were really angry. They said, oh, this doom and gloom story about skiing is really, really bad for the business. You have to stop doing that. And I'm going, no, we need to ramp it up. Like, we can't stop. And it's a little bit like, Wynn talked about, the troller that called him yesterday. It's like, you don't know where the edge is until you actually cross over, until you really, if you're irritating somebody and you're pressing somebody's buttons, you're probably over the edge and you need to push a little harder, in my opinion. So we took the heat from the industry back then with that campaign, and I'm very glad that we did. So that was just a tool that I had in my toolbox, which was an advertising budget for Aspen, and I put it to work to fight, climate change. So, what tools do you have in your toolbox? I think it behooves each of us to ask ourselves that question. And it could be a 401k and directing your investment. It could be your future 401k that you have, and when you're investing that money. It could be, for me, it's like I have an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., and you know what? I'm Canadian. I'm actually a dual citizen. So is my colleague here. I'm an American citizen now, too, for about a year and a half. So I've been living in the U.S. It's our family home in Colorado for the last 20 years. And so I don't think that the senators' offices that are in knew that I was a Canadian advocating on policy change in Washington, D.C. But at least I had 2 passports. I had my American passport with me. And it was really interesting, and you saw it in D.C. We go into both sides of the aisle. Like, we don't just go to the Democrats and, okay, yeah, we'll vote for climate policy, we want climate policy. Go talk to the Republicans over here. And so we do. And I will tell you that one of the best meetings I had last September on Capitol Hill was at Mitt Romney's office, surprisingly. Mitt's just come out, on the right side of another issue recently. But his staff said, what Mitt is doing, he's taken 200 meetings in the last 4 months on climate and the climate issue with people that are coming to Washington. He wants to get the platform right. He wants to get his position right. I talked to somebody else that said, well, I hope he really steps up. So I don't know, maybe he's isolated himself now in the Republican caucus a little bit and doesn't have any heft and any clout. But, it was at least we had an audience that were listening, looking for the right thing to do. And that was, so I'll finish up my remarks. I've been talking a little too long, but look into your own toolbox and see what you can do.
What's interesting, David, you say you got pushback from the industry. The industry is changing now. So Molly Mahar is here, who's president of the Vermont Ski Area Association. The Ski Area Association also, as an association, supported the Global Warming Solution Act. So that really, sends a strong message across the aisle. The National Ski Area Association, I'm currently chair, David's on the board as well, has also really upped its initiative too, and we have a program called Sustainable Slopes, which is encouraging ski areas to join and actually track their carbon output and then track how they're taking actions to reduce it. So the industry is changing. Not everybody is on board. There are still a few in the industry that are owned by people that made their wealth through carbon extraction. But I would say the vast majority of the ski areas, especially the ones that are now owned by Vail and by Alterra and Boyne, are really taking much stronger action collectively. So those are going to make differences. I'm going to turn to Heather and ask for her, but I want to also get some audience participation. So anybody who would like to ask a question or anybody who would like to challenge anything we've said or add to what we said, please raise your hand. We have some microphones, and we really do want to hear from everybody. So as we're making that transition, Heather, so what can people do with nature-based solutions?
Yeah, so first I need to say thank you, Wynn, for your advocacy on the Global Warming Solutions Act and working with the Nature Conservancy and the environmental community to testify and to support that. I think that if we can get more leaders from a broad political spectrum talking about these issues, that's how we're going to make change. Wynn is not part of the traditional environmental community, and we need the most diverse range of business voices out there talking about how climate change is impacting them, their businesses, and their constituents. So I really commend you for doing that. In the same vein, it's really important that we all talk to our where we work, our businesses, support those businesses that are talking about climate change and that are starting to make changes toward that end to go carbon neutral. Talk to your communities, to your town. What is your town doing to address climate change? What is your town doing to help with flood resilience? Are they passing a floodplain ordinance? Are they talking about ways in which we can adapt to climate change? Do they care about habitat connectivity and the ways in which our wildlife is going to thrive going forward? So bring those issues. You can bring them right to your community. You can bring them to your legislators. Get to know your legislators. It's really easy in Vermont. We're small. I saw so many hands go up, and it's great that we have the kind of access to our politicians that we do in the state. Use it. Talk to them about these issues that you care about. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say, support your local organizations that are doing this work. Protect Our Winners, the Nature Conservancy. There's a lot, Rad River Path, there's lots of organizations that are working every day. They have staff getting up every day thinking about how they can make a difference. Support them. They need your help.
Yeah. So do we have anybody from the audience? Question, comment? Yes, please. Can we have a microphone over there? Yeah, and there are so many good organizations. Another one that's really here in Vermont and in the Valley is 1% for the Planet. So it's a great way, and 1% for the Planet, you really choose who you donate with. You can commit as a business to, reserving 1% of your revenue. It doesn't have to be an entire company. In our case, it's our food and beverage. But then you can choose what environmental organization you choose to give to. And so a great flexibility. Question?
Wayne, quick question on how we can better educate visitors at this mountain. Because I feel like the water bubbler in the back was a great change with the red cups, people coming, taking the red cups. This year it's changed to, at one point it was disposable cups, then it went to the water bubbler. Looks like there's disposable cups back, but I feel like tying that story into what's happening with the climate, people come away with, hey, this is something that this mountain's doing. Either they support or they don't, but back to stepping up, I feel like that instills that level of confidence in this mountain.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, that's sort of a great story. I'll take a moment and talk about that, because we have a safety, environmental, and wellness committee that's made up of employees from all of our areas. And each year they come up with different goals in terms of safety, environment, and wellness. A few years ago, they said instead of, having people just buy bottled water and, let's use our own water. It's free, but we'll put out red cups. And that way, they don't have disposable cups. It's great. They're not going to landfill. And then what we found is that was a great idea, but it was putting an incredible burden on our food and beverage people. They were collecting those cups, they were washing the cups, they're using more energy. So this summer, we said, well, let's change. We're going to, use cups instead of, disposable. And we wanted to find compostable cups, but Grow Compost doesn't yet accept cups, right, Margot? So the good idea of using compostable cups went away. So yeah, we could throw them in the landfill. That's better than wax cups. Wax cups aren't recyclable. They go into the landfill. But we put out the wax cups. Well, the feedback we got was pretty vicious. People said, what the hell did you do? It must be Alterra's fault. If that's the first step of the new owners, they're going to be lousy owners. So we said, okay. So then we went out, we bought another water fountain. We said, okay, we're going to encourage people to use the water fountain. And we said, go and buy a bottle. And then people said, well, my kids need to drink. So we said, oh, God. So So now we're actually buying pouches that are going to be basically sold pretty much at cost. Hopefully people will bring their reusables. But in the meantime, we said, okay, we're putting those compostable cups up there. Even though Grow Compost doesn't collect them, it's better than wax paper. So we have compostable cups up there again. But we really want to get to the point where we're not using cups. People are bringing their own and using it or drinking out of the fountain. But it is, a clear point that we tried to do the right thing environmentally. We did. When we changed, people noticed, and it necessarily wasn't the best change, so we had to adjust and react. So I think you're right. What can we also do educationally? Things like this. Clearly we are really trying to promote POW. If you notice, a lot of kids now are putting those POW stickers on their helmet, and people are asking, what's POW? It's a great conversation. David told me that at Aspen, you actually put POW on all your uniforms. Might just talk about that.
Yeah, it was about 6 or 7 years ago, and we'd been supporting Protect Our Winters for many years and done a lot of work with them. Great organization, by the way. And so if you haven't joined POW yet, it's super easy. Go to protectourwinters.org and sign up. They're awesome. But what we did is we said, well, we want to draw attention to our environmental position to try and educate our skiers and riders and start a conversation with them. So I suggested we put POW, Protect Our Winters, literally on the sleeve of every uniform of every employee at Aspen Skiing Company, thousands of pieces. And so we did. So we literally wear POW on their sleeves. And the reason to do it was, number one, in staff training, to train the staff to tell them about our environmental position and POW and other things that we were doing, so they'd be knowledgeable. And then have the sleeve logo, pretty big, by the way, be a conversation starter. So we wanted our guests to say, well, what's that on your sleeve? Why does it say POW on your sleeve? And then they were knowledgeable enough to have a conversation. So then our guests could learn a little bit more, and we could start to grow the movement. So then we had another skier, A-Basin, actually, Alan Henseroth at Arapahoe Basin in Colorado, called me up and said, I saw that you put that on your sleeves. Says, can we do that? And I'm going, this is not proprietary. I would love it if every ski resort in North America, had POW on their sleeve, and a bunch of resorts are doing that today. So,
right. Yes, thanks.
So, would Sugarbush and Alterra commit to going 100% carbon neutral for energy and for other resources by 2022? Just make it happen.
That's pretty quick.
Just build it into the cost of lift tickets and other resources. We'll pay.
Maybe I could start that answer if you want to add to that. So at Alterra right now, I'm building a platform for sustainability, and in there are some aggressive goals about moving to renewable energy in our portfolio. 100% as soon as we possibly can. I don't have the exact year yet, 2022. I can't promise that one. It's a little too quick. I go to each jurisdiction, and we have a different challenge in each jurisdiction. Actually, Vermont is way further ahead than a lot of other places we do business. As I mentioned earlier, Colorado and Utah, big coal states, right? In California, it's even tough, although they're starting to. The regulatory environment there is brutal to get anything changed. But in Mammoth, California, our largest ski area, most ski visits of any ski area we own and operate, about 1.5 million, 1.6 million a year. They've got this massive geothermal plant right adjacent to the town of Mammoth Lakes, and it exports all the energy to Southern California. And I'm going to our leaders there, I said, can't we just do a deal, the town or the ski area, with the geothermal plant right there? And they said, yeah, we're working on it really hard. We're hoping to have that happen. So Mammoth can instantly be 100% renewable as opposed to sucking it out of the grid, which is not. So Alterra is very committed to going to 100% renewable. I was in Utah in the fall and met with the Rocky Mountain Power folks, and the Park City area in Utah, and including Deer Valley that we own there, are going to 100% renewable within the next year with what they're buying, the power they're buying there. Same in Squaw Valley, Alpine Meadows in California. The community is banded together. It's 100% renewable by next year there. So we're making strides on going to renewable, as quickly as we can, and I'm thinking it's probably 2025 before we get it done, but we're working hard on it. So.
One thing we should feel good about here in Vermont is, as background, Vermont is still a regulated distribution utility state, so we can only buy from Green Mountain Power unless we went to cogeneration ourselves, which isn't practical. but we have probably the cleanest electrical energy in the nation. So if you look at the source of generation, it's really clean power coming out of Green Mountain. So we have to depend a little bit on what Green Mountain Power does in order for us to be, 100% renewable. But I mentioned the partnership we did with Clean Lantern in solar. We could probably express it a couple of different ways. That solar that's going into the grid is enough to run all of Mount Ellen or enough to run all of our lifts. So through those actions, I think we are moving really towards that goal. There, and then up here. Yeah.
Yes. One of the things that I think about, somebody tells me, because they stayed at my bed and breakfast, 1969, it was 70 degrees, and I was like this, no snow, I was crying. But I tell people, look at videos of Antarctica. Look at the accelerated rate of melting there. Anybody that has property or lives near or a little above 0 degrees, this is a catastrophe. This is worse than the emissions, but the emissions are bad enough. Out of 15 states in this country, the traffic is incredible. Vermont is not the problem. The problem is everyone in this room needs to call friends in California, friends in New York, and have them state to their congressional leaders, this is a crisis. This is not a joke, it's a crisis. So when you're at a party, pick the phone up, dial those 800 numbers to Mitch McConnell. Do something. Then tell the president his place is going to be underwater.
Amen. We have a question up here.
So
Nina?
one more thing. So make sure everybody in this room goes to people in other states. Have them call. That's the only way we're going to get success.
Thank you. Nina, up here. We have a question up here. Right here. Yeah. I hope you're not wearing a coal hat because you're a coal miner.
Oh no, it's
Okay.
it's one of my students gave it to me. So I am a high school English teacher over at Gould Academy in Bethel, Maine. Yeah, thank you. And it's not unlike some of the ski-oriented academies of the Mad River Valley. And I was wondering, I'm making assumptions here, but looking at the audience, there's a demographic that's missing, and it tends to be something that I see in Bethel a lot, even with our highly populated snow athletes. And my partner who lives in North Conway, I see it too when I go to Nature Conservancy meetings there and at Washington Vale, trail associations. I'm just wondering, how are you getting the voice out to the younger generation? Because we're not going to be here. They will, and I truly love them, but I also know that they'll put stickers of anything on anything if they think it's cool. So I'm just wondering, where does that cool factor stop and where does it actually take action? And I'm going to bring this back to Bethel. Sure. So
No, that's a great question. I think in many ways that younger generation is actually, they don't need to be here in this room because they already get it and they're doing stuff and they're asking us to do it. But, I think, again, what I said, advocating more is really using the vehicles that I think your generation is looking at, like Instagram. We know you don't use Facebook. So, we're trying to, do a lot more on Instagram as well. No, not cool. Absolutely. We have a very big college population of season pass holders here. And so we know we can speak to them. We do speak to them. We do email them. And I think your key is revolutions are never started by old people, right? They're always started by young people. And so that's where this revolution is beginning. I think it's going to continue. But Cameron, you're a professor, so tell us how to get to these youngsters.
So fantastic point. And I was actually thinking, looking out here, that this is a much more diverse age audience than a lot that I speak to. So we're making progress. Excellent job at getting the young crowd out to win.
No, I mean, look at all the gray hair. I see, you're right. Yeah. This is the Mad River Valley.
I guess I'll start with two observations. One is that what I see in the youth today is that that's not where the climate denier population comes from. We're doing a good job educating them, and they're asking me, like, why haven't you fixed this, Dr. Wake? You've been working on it for 30 years. So I think they're already much farther ahead than I was. And I think what's really important for those of us who have been warriors in the climate fight for a long time, thank you for your comments, whoever, it looks like he's gone now, is that we need to find a way to support and lift up these youth leaders. So Greta Thunberg has done an incredible job, and she's got a lot of press. There's thousands of Greta Thunbergs out there. So what are you doing to make sure you're lifting them up? And I'm purposefully not using the word empowering because they already have the power. What we need to do is allow them to use that power to drive change. And I see that generation, the younger generation, as having the political will to drive the change. It's not going to be the boomers. We know what we have to do, but the political will has to come from the youth, and we have to do a much better job at lifting that up and supporting them. And I'll just finish by saying there's a whole bunch of climate scientists that talk about this frequently, and people are like, wow, Greta Thunberg, like she's stealing all your thunder. It's like, no. We are such fans of Greta and her colleagues, and I just want to see more of them, and I want to figure out ways that we can actually promote them. And it now has become my legacy is I'm way less about research and way more about how my students can be future leaders.
So Aaron,
and by the way,
you're a young guy.
And Aaron.
What are you going to do about this?
Yeah, I'd love to speak that. So I definitely think, to echo what's been said a couple times, that I think the young people, more often than not, they get it. And then I also think, in general, the problem is no longer that people don't believe in climate change. Most people believe it exists. I think POW, they do these webinars, and they were talking about some of their stats, and they polled their followers, and I think it was like 97% believed in climate change and believed that it was human caused. Granted, that's people that follow POW, but the reality is that more of the problem is that people aren't acting on that. And so getting all these people that are of an older generation out and motivated to make change for the younger generation, I think is what's valuable. I think the younger generation is going to grow up with the effects of climate change, and they're going to know, they're going to be able to see it. It's hard, I think, when you gradually get eased into it. I think it's really hard for people to see it. You can really easily convince yourself of that warm year, that warm day that you remember 50 years ago, or that really cold day that you just experienced, which for me is why I always look to scientists and people that are doing research that show this in a way that's not biased by your own experience. So I think less about convincing people, whether they're young or old, is more about getting people to act on it, and especially getting people that have money that they can invest into different sources. But really, I mean, the people that have the power are the ones that are going to be able to change this. And in 20 years, the young generation will be able to change it, but hopefully it may be too late by then. So.
No, sooner than that. We want you to change it in the next decade.
That caused a lot of hands to shoot up. Okay, great.
Lisa Lynn with Vermont Ski and Ride magazine. First of all, thank you so much, both for what you're doing on the ground and then for hosting this. This is terrific. And David, I hope you can make this a whole Alterra Roadshow and take them to all your resorts.
Good idea.
Second, we've seen companies here, such as Burton, take pretty strong political stances. We've seen the chart that Cameron put up, and I think that this November there's going to be a really pivotal moment on that chart. David, you've spoken about the power that Alterra has as a group. You're in many, many states. What actions, if any, can you take to impact the pivot that's going to happen in November with the election?
You know, anyone chime in, please. We have a save me. I'm Canadian now. So I will tell you one thing that comes to mind, and it's POW related because we have a POW person here on the stage, is that POW has created the POW Action Fund. And we are spreading that around. So for example, every single Icon Pass holder, and there's a lot of them now in the second year, as some resorts are finding out, got a free membership to protect our winners. And they're growing their membership really quickly because of our action with the Icon Pass. And they're then getting those people to donate. So they're using their funds, and they've got two funds. They've got a 501c3 and a 501c4. The C3 they're using for Get Out the Vote for 2020 in 8 congressional districts that are really pivotal to the balance of control. And then they've created a 501c4, and they're actually raising funds and going to spend money on advocacy on climate, getting people to vote climate and backing certain candidates in 8 congressional districts that they see as pivotal for the 2020 election. So we are looking at Alterra to try and support that effort with POW right now, because they're working hard on it and they've got a head start. So we're examining that right now to see if we can get more involved. We're activating certainly the Icon Pass holders and then see if we can do more. So that's one example of what I think we can do even in the short term for 2020.
Hi.
Jeff first. Jeff and then Greg.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to recognize that Carrie Dolan's here in the audience. She was the co-sponsor of the climate bill that passed in the House this week. And I wanted to turn a question sideways to Carrie and ask her, knowing that it's going forward in the Senate, is there anything that we need to do to help move it the rest of the way through?
Well, thank you. And I actually came here to listen and to support this great work. And I have to echo the thanks from other folks in the audience to thank Sugarbush and Win Smith in particular in hosting this event, having POW up front to acknowledge the challenges that are in front of us, the partnerships that it takes with you all, with organizations like the Nature Conservancy and the Friends of the Mad River and the PATH and other local organizations to really bring a voice to a really critical issue that we're all facing. As a state representative, we oftentimes refer to the House of, at the State House here in Vermont as the People's House. And we're only as effective as when we hear your voices. And it was truly exciting, beginning a couple of years ago, building into this year with a youth summit, where the youth got engaged and were persistent and continue to come to the State House in protesting and taking leave from their schools, a strike on Fridays, to articulate how important this is, as well as hearing from you all. And I can't say enough, as a representative of the People's House, a citizens' legislature, your voice is critically important. We made an important step forward because of the leadership we see on the stage here and you all. We have a big challenge ahead of us to follow through on some big initiatives that are really going to make a difference in how we all can move together in addressing what we can do here in the state. Oftentimes we hear that Vermont's too small to make a difference, but we're not too small to feel the impacts of a changing climate, and then we need to do our part. And the leadership that we hear about today is only going to help us motivate together in making a real meaningful difference certainly for the sake of our children and our grandchildren and future generations. So please keep in touch with us, keep bugging us, keep getting engaged, because it really, truly makes a difference. And again, I thank you all for your leadership.
Thank you, Carrie.
Hello.
Greg.
So I have a suggestion. I would like to see on the website a ride board and a ski house capabilities so that people who are down south, which I drive all the time, drive a lot, had a place to go to your different resorts and look and see, oh, this person over here, one town away, is driving up tomorrow afternoon. Maybe we could split the ride. And then you already have a bus system that runs around, have it centrally located downtown Friday nights and Sunday nights for a way home to get from the mountain to meet the people and go down. have that on your website as an avenue. And same with the ski house. I know you need to make money on all the real estate, but there's a lot of ski houses also out there that could be part of that whole use. And that's a way to save our carbon footprint in a very easy way. And it's just a website link.
You know, if I could, quick response to that. Thank you for that. I just met this afternoon with two Sugarbush management, Margot and Ted. And one of the concepts that they brought up as a good idea to maybe activate here is there's a rideshare app at ski areas. It was developed by a guy I know named DigiDave, Dave Amaralt, and it was launched at Snowbird in Utah last year, and a few areas in Utah are using it, and he's open sourced it to allow the ski areas to join in. So it's just one tool that looks like it's starting to grow within our industry that could absolutely get people could share rides. Get 3 or 4 people, you know, whatever, in a car. It'll bring more people. It'll you know, reduce the carbon footprint of those people on transportation choice. So it came up today. It's a good thing that's coming, and I think it's a great idea to get something like that rolling.
It's a great point because, you know, Vermont has done a lot of really good things. I mentioned earlier in energy, we have really clean energy, relatively speaking. Transportation is the big problem in Vermont. We're a rural state. And so I would advocate for more support for Green Mountain Transit so we could have more transit all year round, right? Mary, hi.
Thanks. You guys are doing great work, and I really appreciate it. Climate...
A little closer so they can pick you up.
Climate change is not just a issue for ski areas or for the United States. My daughter is a climate scientist in France, and according to her, the biggest problem we have at this point is wealth inequality. And nobody wants to talk about that, just like nobody wanted to talk about climate change a few years back in the ski industry. And I think it's something we have to address, and there are huge problems out there, and I'd like to stay hopeful, but when 3 people in the United States have more money than, 98% of the rest of the country, there's something really wrong. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
I'd just like to reinforce a point that both Cameron and David made, that as a volunteer with the Citizens Climate Lobby and the Vermont contingency, we meet with either our members of Congress or their aides 4 or 5 times a year. And although, as Wynn said, it's a very kumbaya moment, and they are all very sympathetic and very concerned about the climate, they also tell us they don't hear from their constituents. And I think it's understandable because they are all 3 such great representatives, and they all agree with us on climate issues, but they only have so much political capital and so much staff time to put to things, and they don't hear from us. They say it's way down on their list. If everybody in this room on Monday called Senator Leahy, Sanders, and Representative Welch's office and said, boy, we were up here at Sugarbush and heard this, and we think you guys really have to start moving on this now, it would probably be more calls than they get in the last 6 months. So I encourage you, I thank all of you for doing everything that you're doing. This is great.
Shout out for Citizens Climate Lobby. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, I run the Flying Ryan Foundation, and Sugarbush is one of our partners. We're very proud about that. Aaron is one of our adventure scholars. But and our focus has really been on core values that matter. And you really stimulated some of my thinking when you said open the toolbox. To represent Ryan properly, we should include the fact that he was very passionate as a young man, self-directed, about environmental sustainability. And in order to represent Ryan properly, we've got to use our platform, which is growing exponentially, to include the fact that environmental sustainability is something that is very, very important to us as representatives of his spirit. And thanks to your comments tonight, that's going to happen.
Thank you, Peter. So that actually answers your question because he has great influence on younger people. Yeah. Seth.
Thank you, and thank you again for putting this on. Several of you have talked about what we can do that's in our toolbox, and I'm also an educator. I'm a 7th grade social studies teacher, and one of the things that one of my students did, they came up with an idea where every student at our school receives a reusable water bottle. So we don't sell bottled water. They use their reusable water bottles, which is great. And that student won an Earth Service Award. That was great. I have them contact their elected officials on the topic of their choice. I'm not trying to indoctrinate them, but they contact their elected officials. The problem is that I see, and maybe you can help me with this, is I hate to call it this, but learned ignorance. And what it comes down to is they're hearing things, whether it be on social media, other places on the internet, from others, friends of theirs, that, and we've all heard it in the news, climate change is a hoax. We don't know what's causing it. It's just cyclical. There are things that we hear all the time. Our President of the United States has come right out on the national stage saying that. And it's very difficult to teach 7th graders science. I can show them your slides when they're hearing all of this in the news from elected officials, from their parents. So first, I guess my question is twofold. One, do you have any suggestions for how to combat this? And two, do you have any talking points for when you're confronted with these asinine comments so that you don't lose the fight to someone talking about windmill cancer?
I don't know. Who wants to tackle that one first? Cameron.
I'll take a shot. 3 things quickly. The president's not a scientist, never has been, never will be. Don't listen to him on science topics. Number 2, 12 words to describe climate change. It's real, it's us, it's bad, scientists agree, we can fix it. Every one of those is a complete lesson plan. That encapsulates the science of the last 30 years. And then last but not least, I know that we work on this out of the University of New Hampshire. There's a NASA program called GLOBE that has developed, GLOBE, you can just Google it. They've developed a whole bunch of curriculum plans for high schools. And the one that I actually use, I'm almost afraid to say this, in my freshman UNH class is on the carbon cycle. You teach them about the carbon cycle and they will be able to talk circles around our president, grade 7, talking about climate science.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ruth, and I don't live in Vermont, but I have something about language, and that's why I really like Protect Our Winters, because it's a different language than climate change. And when Bill McKibben came and spoke to us when I had a reunion over at Middlebury, and he said, it is not climate change, it is climate crisis. And I think that, like, if I tell my mother that we have climate change, she's like, climate change. But I think we need to really rethink the language we're using to describe what's happening. And can't come up with the language, but it's, climate change could be just, oh, well, that's what happens. But climate crisis, I just think that we need to think of the language we use to describe what's really happening. And climate change kind of glosses over some people who aren't, we're the choir here, I think. So I'd like to think about, get the brilliant minds thinking about the language we use to communicate the problem.
You're absolutely right, and I don't know if you were here right at the beginning, but David Perry, actually, when he was here earlier, said exactly that. This is a climate crisis, so you're spot on. So thank you for reinforcing that. But no, it's an excellent point. Excellent point. Seth, I was just thinking about what you said. Parents are so influential, right? And, you know, if you're not having this conversation around the dinner table, you know, you're not telling your kids what's important. So I think we all need to talk to our children, our grandchildren, you know, in a way that they understand about the subject so they aren't misled by false information.
Wynn, I have a question here from the live stream. This is from Zach Freeman with Rasta. He's wondering, he's thinking that it's time to put pressure on industry manufacturers and industry players, partners of our organizations. What can we do to sort of pressure them? The ski industry is doing a lot. That's what he's got.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And, you know, you probably have more leverage over 15 resorts than I do over one. Maybe I'll throw that question to you, David.
I agree there's a really big opportunity to green your supply chain, so to speak, if you're a company that buys a lot of things. And it's more than snowcats and chairlifts, it's foodstuffs and, you know, things every day. So that was another topic I was talking to the Sugar Bush team about this afternoon as well. It's like, okay, what is that a tool in our toolbox to use our purchasing power to force our suppliers to do a better job? I mean, you know, Margot was telling me how appalled we are that when we receive all the food, it's all in cardboard wrapped in plastic from the food suppliers, right? And nobody's making a fuss. Nobody's telling them, no, you're going to bring these in reusable crates, and that's it. You know, that's the only way we'll receive our food and our supplies. You know, those kinds of opportunities are very much there for us. And I think once we get our act together, and I think the act together is very much together here at Sugar Bush, we can start to say to our suppliers, this is the standard that we expect. And if you can't meet that standard, we'll buy it from somebody else. So I think it's a great point from the live stream. Thank you for that comment. And we're going to focus on that in the coming months and years, for sure.
Heather, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add that, you know, the Nature Conservancy as a global organization has taken a lot of flack over the years for working with organizations like Dow Chemical, at Walmart and Amazon to improve their supply chain, to make their products more sustainable, to make their practices more sustainable. And it's something that we see as one of the biggest leverage points that we have. I mean, we are a market-based economy. We need to have intervention points that can create big change. And by working with those companies, that's where you really get that leverage. So we would be happy to help you with that work.
Cool.
And you know, the other thing is it's the consumer has great power. I'll give you an example. There was a young woman who actually has a water business that is actually putting water in recyclable containers as opposed to plastic containers. So she came to us and she said, you know, we'd love it if you could sell it at Sugar Bush. Well, the problem you have is all ski resorts are either Coke resorts or Pepsi resorts. And when you sign up with them, they get an exclusivity. So they're not going to allow a third-party vendor to come in. But we did talk to our current vendor, and interestingly enough, they said, you know, we're getting a lot of pressure from our consumers. So they are now looking at coming up with an alternative to the plastic bottle. They're not out there yet, but that type of pressure, I think, from both these suppliers like us, but also the consumers, is the way you really do change behavior.
I wanted to mention a couple things. So one is, if you look historically at, you were talking before about revolutions. So the other way we get out of revolutions is state by state. If you look at voting rights, if you look at segregation, if you look at labor laws, all that happened at the state level, not at the federal level. So it really matters what Vermont does. It matters a lot. Another thing that people don't realize is in Vermont, our emissions have risen by 13% since 1990. Our emissions are rising. They're not falling. And acts like the Global Warming Solutions Act go right at that. And in 2020, the Nature Conservancy and a whole bunch of other organizations signed on to a platform that Vermonters here can find. It's a 2020 action platform, and there are 4 legs to that. And each of those legs has bills that are going forward. And you can pretty quickly, by going onto the VPIRG site, maybe your site, and others, you can find out what those bills are about. You can find out where they are in the legislature, And if you call your reps and your senators, it makes a difference in Vermont. It really does. Our legislators are very approachable, and literally 5, 10, 15 phone calls can swing a legislator's position. So we have a tremendous amount of power in this room and in the state. And the other thing is, if you join groups like the Nature Conservancy or VPIRG or VNRC or those others, you get engaged with a really motivated, great group of people, which is also or makes you feel good, and you're getting stuff done. So with all that as a lead-in, when I was wondering if you'd say a little bit about the Global Warming Solutions Act and what it does and why you think it's such a great thing.
Yeah, it's, I think like any act, what it is, it's actually trying to have accountability. And so obviously the state has certain goals. And the thing that I think we found probably the most powerful is it's actually going to put accountability into the action. So if action isn't taken, there are going to be consequences. That's probably the most controversial part of it, and that's why some people aren't necessarily in favor of it. But that's the thing that I think is really going to have action, and hopefully won't get watered down, Carrie. But as the current bill passed, that to me I think is as powerful as anything. Heather, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you for those comments. The Global Warming Solutions Act is a way for us to have that accountability that we haven't had before. And Vermont is actually behind in passing this kind of legislation that holds lawmakers accountable to bring groups of people together to create an action plan. Vermont had an action plan about 10 years ago, and it's kind of gone by the wayside. This is an effort to pull people back together and say, how are we going to get there? We need to reduce emissions. It's actually 16%. It's gone up by 16%. We're one of the only states where emissions is going up in New England. Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York. Who am I missing? Maine. Thank you. See, you guys know. They've all passed this kind of accountability legislation. And it doesn't, despite some of the rhetoric out there, this is not a situation where there's going to be big lawsuits with a lot of money involved. It is a situation where we can hold our government accountable for getting us on the right path, and we need to do it. So get behind it, join us, and thanks for your
As
support.
I understand it, Heather, the primary reason for that is actually transportation, followed by the housing sector.
Yeah, I mean, our transportation sector, greenhouse gas emissions continue to go up. People continue to be driving larger cars. Home heating is the other sector where we're seeing emissions rise. This is a way to get a handle on that, create a real roadmap for how we reduce emissions from our transportation sector. Hugely complicated, of course, as well as home heating, but we can do it. This is the path forward to have those conversations and bring the people to the table that need to be talking about it.
Other questions? Hands? Yeah. Yes, and there's some over here too, John. In there. Yeah, in the back first.
Hi, my name is Claire, and I've heard a lot of great points brought up tonight, and I just want to bring some things together. So just a little background. I grew up in upstate New York, really close to the Berkshires. I was lucky enough to go to UVM with Aaron, actually. And then I moved to Boston, where I've been volunteering for a really amazing nonprofit called Youth Enrichment Services. I have some fellow volunteers here. We teach underprivileged Boston youth how to ski and snowboard, and Sugarbush has actually been so great in partnering with our organization over the last few years. I know there are similar organizations out there. Burton has Chill, and I think my thought is my love for nature was instilled at such a young age because I grew up in a rural community. And, I ended up minoring in environmental studies. And then now I'm sharing this love for the environment, for nature, through working with the Yes Kids. And I just think that it would be so beneficial to have organizations like POW and the Nature Conservancy, first become aware that these organizations are out there and see a partnership with them. So yeah, I just want to say thanks to Sugarbush. I hope that Alterra can continue this partnership with Yes, because going back to some points that were brought up before about providing awareness for kids and also, especially underprivileged youth. I think as stated, that's our future, and I think those partnerships could be really great. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
There's a hand over here.
Sorry, second question about the mountain.
Oh.
This is for Win. Right here. Yes, sorry, I'll stand up. What's the long-term plan with GMX if we can't get the...
With what?
With the Green Mountain Express.
Oh, yeah.
If there's
Actually, this goes back to my weather volatility. We had a really severe lightning strike on the Green Mountain Express this summer. Basically knocked out all the circuitry. It's been a nightmare trying to repair it. We still have one component we can't get there. AB&B can't figure it out. PAMA can't figure it out. And so we had to make the reluctant decision to run it on diesel, which is not something we want to do at all. But because it has 2 diesel engines and it's such an important lift to Mount Ellen, we had to do it. So we're hopefully at a point where the insurance company is going to agree that it can't be fixed and they're going to allow us to put in a new drive.
So that'll go in this summer?
It will go as soon as we get permission to get a new drive.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes. Oh, okay.
Yeah, hi, Finn Galloway Kane. Thank you very much. It was mentioned earlier that Alterra owns a heli skiing operation. And given the massive carbon footprint per customer in that business, I was wondering what Alterra is doing to minimize its carbon footprint in that part of its business.
Yeah, it's a great question. Helicopter skiing is the ultimate skier experience. It's also the ultimate carbon footprint per skier. So, and we run 11 operations in British Columbia in spectacular areas, and we haul a lot of jet fuel and diesel fuel into those wildernesses. So it's embarrassing, So fortunately, the CMH team is really anxious to start to fix up their own operations. There's no such thing as an electric helicopter that will haul people, so that one's probably not going to happen soon. However, the lodges are the big energy user. And so we have one lodge now that's operating on a microhydro plant because there's a water source nearby, about 1 kilometer away from the lodge, and covers 90% of its electricity. We're putting another microhydro plant in at the Caribou Lodge this summer. And we've got a roadmap to sort of do one every year or two to convert those lodges to hydropower, because right now a lot of them are operating on diesel. So there's a good, strong movement to try and fix up that operation. The helicopters, we have to look at other parts of our company, frankly, to offset, the carbon footprint of the helicopters, because we're not going to be able to do it in an operation, and it's still something that people love to do, including me. And it's got a big carbon footprint, but it's also kind of the dream pinnacle of our sport. So we don't want to shut the company down. We just want to do the best we can at greening that operation. So it's a fair point you made.
One of the things that POW has on the website is a carbon calculator, and it can actually show you the amount of carbon pounds that are emitted by driving a car from Boston to Sugarbush, flying, from Boston to Denver, et cetera. So it's a really interesting thing. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend going. Cameron?
I'm going to push back a little bit. So I've done the helicopter skiing. If you haven't gone, go now. It's fantastic. But maybe we could start a new movement like Friends Don't Let Friends Go Helicopter Skiing. And I would have as my display of Aaron right here, and also Jeremy Jones, who does his backcountry skiing now without helicopters. And so, do the helicopter thing. But there's also a lot of, you can learn how to earn your vertical, and it's just as much fun.
So,
no, that's an easy target. That was an easy target.
Totally to echo that point, I think there are tons of ways to reach that pinnacle of skiing, but I also think that there are systemic ways that we can change the economics of it. And if you make heli skiing, it's already really expensive. But if you make it really, really, really expensive because gas is more expensive because we're taxing it, or you make other things much cheaper because solar is so cheap now, the economics are going to be such that people are going to naturally stop heli skiing as much. or they're going to find alternatives that they like more. And so I think you can pick one activity to call out, but that's almost blinding yourself, right? You could say don't drive every day or every weekend up here from Boston or whatever it is, but the reality is that people love doing what they're going to do and they're going to do that, and we should. But if we can make systemic change that makes the economics different, that's really where the change is going to happen.
One there, and then there's a question here.
Hi, so looking at what we can do individually, we'll go back to that one. We built a house in the northern part of the valley. It is a very energy efficient home. It's all electric. We have Washington Electric, which is all renewable electricity, which is really great as far as we're concerned. But my concern is, what is the impact that we just had on the environment by building this really great home? What is the impact that we have by putting in all of the solar panels, by buying the electric cars? Is our return on our investment going to happen soon enough to really make any kind of impact?
So the ROI on your solar panels is and your energy efficiency is definitely going to pay back. It's going to be a few years, maybe 10. So that's good. But I would argue more importantly is that the way you get that return on investment, ROI, climatologist talking economics, be careful, is that you are serving as a wonderful example and you're the leading edge, right? You're the early adopters, is that we need that to happen with way more people so that return on investment, the number of years comes way down. And what we're beginning to see now is that is exactly the case with big solar and big wind, right? It's less than fossil fuel. So we need to continue to run these experiments, and not that your life is an experiment, but let's say you're right, this house, because people need to see it. It's really important. So if it's not perfect now, it's okay. It's the glide path that we need to be on.
I think we have time for one or two more questions, so one here.
Yeah, again. But about earning your turns, that's a big community in Bethel, and I think it's just because of where we live and the accessibility that happens there. But I find it somewhat ironic that ski resorts, Sunday River, Mount Abram, even local ones, are charging for uphill passes because it's our decision to do that pain to our bodies. So I'm wondering, you know, you're talking about making it more expensive, right? This, in my mind, you know, I'm a teacher, I don't make that much, so I'm on a payment plan for my backcountry gear right now. Like, so if I'm already on a payment plan, now I'm on a payment plan to go where I want to. It just seems ironic, and it seems like it's almost pushing away the idea of, you know, human-powered green energy. So I'm just wondering, is there a reason for that?
There is. I mean, we don't charge for that. So we have a policy, and
I didn't know that.
And we ask you to skin on certain routes. So we have an evening route, we have a morning route. We ask you to be off the mountain before we start, because right now we don't think our trails are amenable to uphill and downhill traffic. It's dangerous. Some do allow it. But the reason people may charge is it's very expensive running a ski resort. And so, you know, a lot goes into grooming that prepares the trail. We have ski patrol that's there if you get hurt. So, you know, we are not a charitable organization. We do have to earn, you know, money, and we have to earn money to be sustainable. So if somebody's charging, I suspect that's why they're doing it. But here, as long as you follow our policy, you can skin and you don't have to pay for it.
And I may actually have a counter to your intuition idea about this. And I've seen out west in some places that they didn't charge and people were going up and down it. And there they have other problems like avalanche hazards and stuff. And they just shut it down. They were just like, this isn't worth it. We have the lease on this land, no uphill. And so I would much rather see ski areas like Bolton charging for a season pass and letting it happen. And these trails, they either own the land or they have a lease. And so they do have some rights to it. And they are often, the reason we're there is because they made snow or because it's groomed. And when it's good, we're not there. We're skiing in the backcountry. And so I think I think there is. I think if it was the same as a season pass or a full day ticket, that would be a little silly. And I do think that we should be encouraging it. And it's great if a ski resort wants to keep it free, but I would rather have it cost $10 a day or $100 a year than not have it.
So I'm going to throw my opinion in there because I think you're right. And at the 4 ski areas at Aspen Snowmass that I worked at for 15 years, we had the same question come up because the ski areas were charging $150 for an uphill pass. And, I don't want to do this to put pressure, well, maybe put pressure on the ski areas. And I'm not speaking for all of Alterra now because we're quite inconsistent. We're a young company. I said, no, we're not going to charge for uphill. So we eliminated, and we were trying to figure, ski areas were trying to figure out how to monetize uphill. And because they're a business. And so I said, no, let's figure it out. So we started to do some other things. We started to hold moonlight dinners, uphill only, to Mountaintop Restaurant. You can buy the dinner. It was a buffet, had a live band. It was awesome. We started doing clinics for uphilling. You could rent the gear. We'd have a ski pro, and we did free clinics for people to do it. We started a breakfast club at Buttermilk Mountain where people skin up. We got about 400 people a day doing it right now. And they can get smoothies at a smoothie bar up there, and they do it. It's like a social event, right? So we can make a little bit of money on the F&B, but if you don't want to spend money, you don't have to. And it's been hugely popular. So all 4 ski areas at Aspen Snowmass do not charge for uphill. There are safety regulations for sure. 2 of the mountains have the risk of uphill-downhill collisions, and so you have to uphill either on a designated route or before operating hours or after. So I'm a proponent of not charging for uphill and figuring out another way to make the money.
So I hate to tell you, you're sitting right here, but there are about 100 people that just skinned up to Waltz at Mount Ellen for a tour to Moon and are probably skiing down right now.
I already skinned up.
Okay. We'll take one more question, then we will adjourn. Pierre.
Yeah, thanks, Wynn. Everybody's talking about individual efforts that we can all do. We're all down at the bottom of the triangle of, how to impact this crisis that we're at. But when I was a kid, my parents used to talk to me about how FDR used to have his fireside chats. He was talking to people, telling them, hey, you may not like this, but this is what we have to do. I think it was probably back when World War II was the big topic. And so what I want to say is that, not everything can be done from the bottom up. A lot of it has to come from the top. We all need leadership in just about every organization or society. There's got to be good leadership. So, we need to have somebody at the top that can sit down and talk to people with FDR's type fireside chats and tell them, hey, look, I'm not going to tell you not to drive those big pickup trucks just to go down and buy a loaf of bread, but think about what it can do. Think about a couple, maybe you can combine that trip with another errand. You'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Or maybe next time you're in the market for a car, let's look at what the Europeans are doing. I've been over to Europe a lot, doing a lot of bicycling, and one of the things that really impresses me about them is that you don't see any big pickup trucks. You don't see any big 18-wheelers. But from pickup trucks, they have small pickup trucks. And I don't know exactly what they burn in fuel, but I'm sure they don't burn the kind of fuel that, the big Dodge 350s or whatever do. And I realize that in Vermont, we are highly dependent on, as has been mentioned, on the need for transportation due to the geography of our state. But I think there's a lot can be done from the top. Maybe from not so much from the top of our state, but from Washington. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but I think this is a very important thing. I think we need people at the top, people in the White House, people in Congress who can who can, advise people, can talk about, give us some fireside chats about, hey, this is reality now. This is the real thing. Thank you.
Go Bolt.
Thank you.
So if I can segue quickly from there, there's one way that we can get a new person into the top. And so I've been called out a few times for being a millennial. So I'm going to embrace that. And everybody get out your phone, if you can, out of your pocket. I know you're usually supposed to keep it on silent in your pocket. And we're just this is pledging that you're going to vote in the election. A big piece is that people don't get out and vote. We may all believe it, but then the day comes and you don't actually do it. So if you can text ACT4POW to 52886 to pledge that you're going to vote. And I'm going to do it too. So, yep. So what you're going to do is instead of putting a phone number, you're going to do 52886. That's your phone number. So and then in the text message, you're just going to write ACT4POW.
So thank you for your comments. Everybody's doing the Act to POW right now. I'm going to do it in a minute. It's absolutely important for Washington to act, but I would say, having been in this battle for 30 years, is that it's a very dangerous strategy to think that that's all we need to do. It's absolutely what we have to do, and especially here in New England, we need to come up with the examples to show how it is we transition to net zero emissions economy, and one where we have a fantastic quality of life, where we have great jobs, where we have income equality, where we have sustainability, not just from an environmental perspective, but from jobs in the economy and from a whole range of different social indicators. So Washington, yes, but be the change that you want to see right now.
Amen.
Well said. I think on that note, Cameron, that's a perfect ending. So thank you, Aaron. Thank you very much. Great skiing with you today. Cameron, love your scientific facts and the approach. Heather, thank you, and glad we learned more about the great work you're doing here. And David, thanks so much for coming all the way from Denver and telling us a lot more about what you are intending to do as well. And thank all of you for attending. It was a great conversation.